Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Talking here about the Gosnell trial. Kirsten Powers in USA Today, Democrat strategist, saying, look, Gosnell is not an outlier. She gave 4 examples: Maryland, Delaware, Illinois, one other place, I forget now offhand, where abortion clinics were shut down because the conditions in these abortion clinics were just absolutely so unsanitary and so unsafe. Now, here is the doctor. This is clip 1. Here's an abortion doctor, late-term abortion doctor in Washington, D.C., which has the loosest abortion restrictions in the country, describing to an undercover investigator what would happen if a baby survived an abortion attempt. Let's listen.
Usually at this point in your pregnancy, it's too early to survive usually.
Okay.
It will expire shortly after birth.
But if it did, like what would happen? Like, would I have to take it home or like be responsible for
I
it?
mean, technically, legally we would be obligated to help it, to survive. But, it probably wouldn't. It's all in how vigorously you do things to help a fetus survive at this point. When you have a pregnancy that's 23, 24 weeks, if you're, extra, if you do everything possible to help it survive, there's maybe a 20 to 30% chance that it would survive. If you don't do anything, then, the chances are much, much less.
Cause I'm just so scared of having to be
Sure.
stuck with the
That's
responsibility.
obviously,
Like, would you make sure that it
Yeah,
it doesn't
there's
survive?
things you do. Obviously, you're here for a certain procedure, and if your pregnancy were, let's say you went into labor, the membrane's ruptured, and you delivered before we got to the termination part of the procedure here, then we would do things, we would not help it.
We would not help it. You came in there to kill the baby. We're going to make sure it happens, even if the baby is born alive. Now, we'll get to the phone calls right after this clip, 888-589-8840. Here's Ben Smith of BuzzFeed, and listen to where he tries to lay the blame for the conditions that investigators found in the Gosnell abortion clinic. Let's listen.
I mean, there's certainly been a campaign on the right to make it in lieu of being able to actually ban abortion, just to make it incredibly difficult to get. And this is obviously the downside of that, right? That people wind up going outside the law. And clearly not, and I actually don't, I think the abortion rights movement, is not defending Gosnell here, although somebody from the National Abortion Federation refused to certify his clinic and then didn't call the cops, which is pretty damning.
So he says, look, the fault of all of this are pro-lifers, because they're working so hard to make it difficult to get an abortion that people wind up going outside the law. So pro-lifers are forcing these people to kill their babies in unlicensed, illegal clinics because the pro-lifers, and also it's all the pro-lifers' fault. That's what he's saying. Well, let's go to the phones. Let's go to John in Lottie, Florida. John, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right. I don't have no computer. The Holy Spirit won't allow me to have one because Jesus is such a jealous God, but otherwise I'd tweet you. But one thing we got to think about, we got to keep hitting home. We got to mention every time we talk about homosexuality is just like in Sodom and Gomorrah, they had too much time on their hands.
Well, in the Bible, there's a proverb. The Bible doesn't say this. There's a proverb that says idle hands are the devil's playground. And that's a true fact. When you got time on your hands, your mind and your actions tend to drift toward things that really probably aren't the best use of your time and abilities. All right, John, well, listen, thank you. Thank you for that. Let us go to Jacob in Richmond, Virginia. Jacob, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, I just had a comment about homosexuality in reference to the basketball player.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that homosexuality is a choice and that it's just a preference. Anybody can choose to be straight if they want to.
Well, what we're saying, just to be clear, Jacob, What we are saying is that sexual behavior is always a matter of choice. We may not always be able to understand where the impulses come from, but the reality is all of us experience sexual impulses that if we yielded to them, they would destroy us. And we have a responsibility as moral free agents to resist those impulses that will take us sexually into dark directions. Anyway, go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, I had one question. I know that I know myself growing up from the time I was 10 until now. I'm 27. I have only ever been attracted to women. That's the only group I've been attracted to. So if it's a choice, if God said it was okay, could you engage in sexual relations with another man? Because remember, it's a choice.
Correct. It is a choice. And see, God's basic design for our humanity and for our sexuality is to be drawn to members of the opposite sex. That's God's basic design. That's where our sexual attraction is designed to go. And then what God's plan is for us to channel all of our sexual energy to hold off and restrain sexual expression prior to marriage, and then channel all of our sexual energy into that one relationship with my husband or with my wife, depending on whether I'm a guy or a girl. So that's God's design. So that's the direction that our desires is intended to flow. It's intended to move in that direction. Doesn't mean that anything we want to do, any desire we experience with a member of the opposite sex, is something that we ought to yield to or indulge in. But clearly, sometimes for reasons we don't always understand, that sexual desire can be diverted in some way. Now, the researchers that did the study on the identical twins and said, look, there's only a concordance rate of 6.7%. You know, the point that they made is oftentimes imprinting activities, events can happen in childhood that have a profound sexual imprint on the way a child understands his sexual identity. You know, I've talked to people that came out of the homosexual lifestyle, and one of the common threads is that they were seduced as a young boy. Their first sexual experience was at the hands of an older adult male. And when that happens to somebody who is a young child, it has a powerful imprinting effect on the way they understand their own sexual identity.
Can I comment?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, my only point is that if sexuality is a choice, I just find it amusing that when you say it's a choice, you are at the same time saying you choose to be straight. I don't choose to be straight. I was born straight. That's who I am. I'm attracted to women. When you say it's a choice, you're saying that you are choosing to love women, to be intimate with women. But if a circumstance came up, like Abraham being told to kill his child, if a circumstance came up where God gave the okay, you could be intimate with another man. I find that hilarious and very bizarre because I can only...
Well, Jacob, what I find bizarre is that you can imagine a universe in which God would give a command like that. I mean, that's what's bizarre to me, that you can picture God commanding people to engage in homosexual behavior. And here's the point, Jacob. The point is, regardless of where sexual impulses come from, and regardless of where they are directed to, we have a responsibility as those made in the image of God, as free moral agents, to resist sexual impulses that take us away from sexual intimacy in marriage between one man and one woman. Doesn't matter what direction that sexual impulse takes you, and that's clearly what God has directed us to do. And God would not direct us to do something, Jacob, that's impossible for us to do. He would not challenge us, direct us to make decisions that we cannot make. Last word.
He directed Abraham to kill his son, and Abraham didn't do it because at the last moment he said, never mind, your faith has been proven. If he directed you to sleep with a man in the same way as he directed Abraham to test your faith, you're saying you could do it because it's a choice. I couldn't do it. because I was born straight.
All right, Jacob. Well, I guess you can thank God for that then, that's a sin that you don't have to deal with the temptation to commit that sin. That's part of God's grace in your life. Well, let's go to Dwayne, Little Rock, Arkansas. Dwayne, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, man, what's going on?
Hey.
Hey, man, I like the way you explained that to that last caller.
Well, good. Well, thank you.
Yeah. The reason I was calling him because we was talking, you was talking about the German Gosnell thing.
Yes.
And it seemed to me that, you had a special emphasis on those children or those, fetuses or embryos, whichever terms that they are at their life right then and there. But I was just concerned that it seemed like we were focusing on them instead of just in abortion in general, because every life is important. You know what I mean?
And here's what I think, Dwayne. I appreciate what you're saying, but here's the point that I would make in response to that. You're exactly right. We should care about all babies. But here's the thing, Dwayne. What's happening here with this Gosnell thing is this has gotten the attention of people that believe that abortion's okay in a way that nothing else ever has. Not since Roe v. Wade have I ever seen the foundations of the pro-abortion apologists shaken like they've been shaken in this Gosnell case. James Taranto, committed social libertarian. I mean, it rattled him right to the core. Kirsten Powers, I never thought I would ever see her write basically what amount to pro-life pieces defending the pro-life point of view. So that's the good thing, Dwayne, that I would see about this. I mean, not that this is a good thing, but if there's any good thing that can come out of this travesty, it would be that this event is so dramatic, it is so traumatic, that it's grabbing the attention not only of the pro-life community, but also of the pro-abortion community, and it's moving them pretty powerfully in the direction of life and in the direction of wanting to provide protection, not just for the babies that we lost in abortion clinics like this, but to provide legal protection for all babies at all stages of development. Well, listen, Dwayne, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. We got a break coming up here, and we'll be right back after just 2 brief minutes. Don't forget the One Cry Prayer Summit this Thursday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Central, right here on AFR Talk. Focal Point AFR Talk.